Thank you so much for having me here today. And I'm not sure where Judy is sitting, but her vision has made today possible. So could we give her a round of applause? Thank you, Crossroads, for hosting, Bob, for that wonderful introduction. I believe so strongly in the power of storytelling. I have helped people who have had cancer work on their stories as part of my volunteering with the American Cancer Society. And I believe that it's invaluable to get our stories down for ourselves and for all those who love us. So thank you for asking me to talk about something that I am passionate about. When people discover that I have had a book published, they look at me kind of sideways, and they get a certain look in their eye, and the conversation almost always goes like this conversation I'm going to talk about that I had with an elderly man. So, you're an author, he stated. Yes, and I drag the word out to at least 2 syllables. Because as I eye that retired gentleman sitting next to me, who's a stranger, at a political event that I'm attending with my husband, I know where he's going. My daughter tells me I should write a book, he said. I nodded, expecting the inevitable statement. The words might vary, but the desire to get a life on paper remains constant. In hundreds of conversations I have had since my memoir was published, and people learn I am an author. Don't do it, I said, as I steadied the plate of appetizers on my lap and wondered what to do with my water glass. What do you mean, don't do it? And you are probably wondering the same thing, because isn't that why we're all here today? To get our stories on paper. And I said, don't do it. I set my water glass down. I said, don't write a book, write one story, I said. Maybe how you met your wife. And then another story about how you got in trouble as a child. And then another story. He smiled and nodded. I can do that, he said. Setting out to write a book is too daunting, I said. People usually give up. He said, okay, I understand. But I told him, whatever you write will be treasured by your family, even if it isn't an entire book. His faded eyes tracked mine. You know, I like that, he said. When I built my first airplane, many people wondered at the enormity of the task. It was my turn for surprise. You built an airplane? Yes. Where did you build an airplane? In my garage. How did you do it? He laughed at my inevitable question. The same way you wrote your book, he said, piece by piece. Today, we're going to be talking about the pieces of telling a story. Some of you will write entire books, but many of you will collect the pieces and still create something beautiful. 12 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. The cancer was caught early, and my prognosis was and continues to be good. But then my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma, followed by my mom with stage 3 ovarian cancer, which quickly digressed to stage 4. There was a season of time when all 3 of us were being seen by oncologists, and we were scrambling to understand an uncertain future that was now, of course, not affecting just me and my parents, but all who loved us. And I began to think about legacy. The legacy I would leave and the legacy my parents had instilled in me. And as I watched my parents live out the end of their stories, I realized the importance of living with the end in mind while celebrating life right here and right now. Let me repeat that. I realize the importance of living with the end in mind, living with eternity in mind, while celebrating life right here and right now. So when I use the word legacy, I'm talking about purpose and meaning. We want to make a difference while we're here on this planet. And if we have kids and grandkids, we want to make a difference in their lives and a difference in people's lives for eternity. And that's what I mean when I talk about legacy. Psalm 139 ends with this line, "Lead me in the way everlasting." And when I read through that psalm and pray that psalm, I like to use my own words and say, lead me on paths that make a difference for eternity. Lead me in the way everlasting. Lead me on paths that make a difference for eternity. Recently, I was at a cancer event, and I had a book table for my book, Under a Desert Sky. And so I knew, cancer event, that everyone there had been touched by cancer in some way. Either they had personally been diagnosed or they loved someone who had been diagnosed with cancer. And so a man came up, an elderly man shuffled over to me and asked me, "What's your book about?" I said, "It's a story of living a legacy of hope, faith, and love, even in hard places." He looked at the ground. "Too bad we only think about legacy when we are at the end." I attempted to make eye contact with him. I said, "But you're living your legacy every day." He shook his head. "It's too late. It's too late." And someone interrupted me with a question, and I didn't get to finish my conversation with this bent-over man. I wanted to tell him, it's not too late while you have breath. It's not too late. So let me echo what Bob shared at the beginning. If you're here, it is not too late. I think one of the obstacles we face when we talk about legacy is the thought that our story isn't valuable, that we didn't do anything famous or noteworthy, that our kids and grandkids and our friends, they aren't interested in our past. And I think if we're talking about dates and facts and figures and names of people they don't know, that might be true. But if we're talking about belonging and connecting and being part of a story that is not found in this fast-paced, disjointed world, then I think our children and grandchildren and those we love are very interested in our stories, even if they don't voice them or not. And if you're younger in this room, trust me when I say the people that love you are very interested in your story. We live in an age where 2,700 new books are published in America every day. 2,700 new books are published in America every day. And if we throw in Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and all the social media stuff, it's all about telling a story, sharing a story. Marketers have picked up on the value of storytelling. They call it story branding. Every product, business, and entity, from the political candidate down the street to the tire shop, to the box of Frosted Flakes on your breakfast table, they all have a story they want you to feel a part of. They have realized something very important that I think we need to remember today. According to writer Leslie Leyland Fields, the greatest power of story is to illuminate and reveal larger spiritual truths in ways that mere facts can't do. Few people are interested in a theological discussion. Even less are interested in a religious cliche, but they will listen to a good story told well. And I think many of us would agree with a friend of Leslie's who said, "My children and grandchildren, they might not listen to a sermon, but maybe they will listen to my story." And so that's why I know many of us are here today. Psalm 90, verse 12 says, "So teach us to number our days, that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. It is wise and prudent to consider our story, to keep eternity in mind while we celebrate life right here and right now." I want to share with you a story that's from my book, Under a Desert Sky, and it is a legacy story. We had a tradition when our children turned 18 that in addition to a normal party where they ate too much pizza and consumed too much sugar, we had a party where they would invite adults that had an impact on their life. And so they would invite coaches, youth pastors, teachers, maybe parents of their friends. We put a fancy dinner on in the backyard, and the adults would come and speak a blessing or give advice or pray a prayer over our son and daughter that was turning 18. And I think on the table back there, there's a sample invitation of what we sent out if you were interested in that type of a party. And I also included a letter that I spoke as a blessing over our youngest daughter. But this story is about the party we gave for our youngest son when my parents both had cancer and they came. My dad stood under the arching cat's claw vine on a perfect January night. He positioned his handwritten note so he could catch the glow from the strands of twinkling lights entwined in the branches. He had traveled 1,600 miles to give our youngest a gift for his 18th birthday party, the passing of a spiritual blessing from one generation to another. For months, we had talked about the possibility of their coming. "We can connect you to Zoom for the party," I told my mom, "or call you on the phone." "We will come if we are up to it," Mom had said. And I knew her words were true. But I also knew how much stuff we were talking about, so tried not to get my hopes up. When Dad stood before the party guests, I wondered what words of wisdom and blessing he would share with our son, Zach. What do you travel 1,600 miles to say? Do you talk about integrity, honor, courage, finding a job you love, the importance of hard work, of honesty? Dad talked about none of those things. Dad talked about laughter, the power of joy, of not focusing on cancer, but on discovering reasons to smile every day. I watched this man who had loved me for more than 50 years speak wisdom to our son. I knew I was hearing the heartbeat of his life. For this was a man who joked with his oncologist and always got the nurses laughing. When my husband had asked him for my hand in marriage decades ago, the only stipulation he had given him was, "Make my daughter happy." Dad cleared his throat and readjusted his page to the light. Did he choke back emotion or the damage in his lungs from melanoma? I wasn't sure. A never-ending cough had gripped his body and was wearing him down. Earlier in the week, he had to pause to catch his breath when climbing one flight of stairs at our daughter's apartment. He slept in a chair to reduce the coughing and was on his 4th Super Plus giant-size bag of cough drops. "A joyful heart is good medicine," Dad read from King Solomon's wisdom in Proverbs, "but a broken spirit dries up the bones." He turned to Zach. "Pursue laughter," he said. "Find reasons for joy." Then he sat down. but not without first saying a one-liner that got all the guests to laugh. Mom stood to address the party guests with her turquoise scarf and her missing eyebrows drawn in place. On her feet were slippers because her feet were too swollen to put on shoes, and in her hand was a Kleenex to wipe her constantly dripping nose, a side effect from losing her nose hairs to chemo. What do you travel 1,600 miles to say? What grips your heart so you schedule your chemo the morning of your flight and then get on a plane to come speak a blessing over your grandson? Do you talk about love, a sacrifice, finding the perfect life mate? Mom talked about none of those things. She unfolded a paper and spoke the words from Psalm 139. She told our son he was fearfully and wonderfully made by God. That his heavenly Father had a plan and purpose for his life only he could fulfill. He was not an accident, and God had incredible days written in his book, future chapters and destinies to walk out that they might not live to see. I listened to this woman who was several more chapters into her life story than our son. I knew I was hearing the heartbeat of her life, of generations who had followed God and had chosen faith in difficult times, a woman who would leave a heritage to her children's children's children. All this is God's plan, Mom said to our son. We don't know everything about who you're going to be or what you're going to do, but you are loved. You are a blessing to your family, and you are a life giver to the world. She returned to Dad's side. They intertwined fingers. Laughter and faith held hands as they sat under the cat's claw vine in the backyard, a vine that had withstood the heat and drought of many summers. For 55 years of marriage, love had triumphed over adversity, and when given the opportunity, our son's grandparents traveled 1,600 miles to speak a legacy of blessing over him. Because of my parents' intentionality, I find myself today considering legacy and storytelling. I hope you do too. Maybe you don't come from a family like I did that claims a spiritual legacy. Well, guess what? You can be the one who chooses to live that spiritual legacy for your family, and you can start that legacy today. You have stories that connect you to those you love and give them a sense of belonging, not only to life on this earth. Your stories can connect others to God, to belonging to Him and His family. Your life matters for eternity. You have experiences too valuable to just drift into oblivion. Today, gather the pieces and create something beautiful like the man who built an airplane in his garage. And maybe you too will create a memory that will help others to fly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So moderators, you have some questions. And so we're going to take about 12 minutes right now. And so moderators, if you would read the first question, make sure your table has time to discuss it, then go on to the second and go on to the third. So you have 12 minutes, and please read the question out loud since you're the only one with the sheet of paper.